Hey now, vice chair is doing his vice chair thing. um, I'm just
You're
sending
live.
her a note right now.
You're live, Chair Emeritus. Just Ricardo,
Oh,
don't stop recording. You don't have to do anything,
don't
but
hang
just
on.
close it out, right? Because I need that to do the minutes for you guys.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Micah.
You're welcome.
So it is August 21st. This is a meeting of the Racial Profiling Ad Hoc for the Oakland Police Commission. Thankfully, today we're going to be reviewing the chief's feedback and as well deciding that this is ready to go to the commission to be adopted, or making some other decisions. We will also have an opportunity to begin taking a look at the discipline matrix, to figure out what our way forward will be. So I am happy to recognize Lieutenant Hubbard, if you would not mind walking us through the chief's comments so we can have some discussion about agreements or, standing firm or however we want to proceed. Lieutenant Hubbard?
Can you all see my screen?
I can't.
No,
I see you, but I don't see the screen.
That one more time. How about that?
Okay, yes, now we can.
Okay, you can all see the policy.
Yes.
Okay, great. I made a couple just very minor adjustments today. Just as I read it again, it's mostly grammatical. I will take you to one section. He only had one comment, and let me see if I can take you to that comment here. I know where it's at. The only comment he had was this, he didn't like that I use the acronym, which is understandable, of TOS. It stands for the Tactical Operations Support Team. And this edit was in regard to officer identification, where it's mandatory. I will say, since we last met, last Monday, we had the independent monitoring team site visit and wanted our use of force assessor, Chief Kyler. She did ask about this section. So in today's email, I did put next steps about sending this to the monitoring team, because they'll look at the whole policy, but she in particular has a lot of interest over this one section about officer identification during contacts, because this comes up often in use of force audits that she does. So,
And who is this person you mentioned?
her name is Chief Kyler. She's part of the monitoring team, and she used to be a chief of police in Arizona.
Is she new on their monitoring team? I've never heard her name before.
She's been there for 5+ years now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some of us don't understand how the monitoring team, what do they do? What is their purpose?
They were brought in during the negotiated settlement agreement. Actually, this is our second monitoring team, and they provide oversight for all things negotiated settlement agreement. So there's many tasks that are associated with it. One of them is racial profiling and stop data, which this policy does fall under. So typically what we do is we send them either the draft policy if we're asking for technical assistance from them, or in this case, after the commission approves it, then we would send it to them for final review. Usually they don't have any edits, but it's just more. And then when they do come back later this year, I'll do a formal presentation with them on this policy.
And to that point, Deacon Lyles, generally in policy process, the monitors team takes a look at the processes that are internally created so that they can weigh in before it comes to the police commission. This is slightly different because it started at the police commission level. So we wanted to get feedback from the chief. So we're going, I don't want to say backwards, but I think it's also extremely important. You know, I sent this to the monitor early on, but apparently there is a, I don't know if I want to call it a strategy. He wants to be formally requested to review it as
Okay,
opposed to me just sending it. Mhm.
I understood monitoring team as a verb, not as a noun. This is the monitors team. This is
Correct.
Warshaw's team.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And so we got to be clear how we communicate, because I was saying, well, who is the monitoring team? I thought it was another entity that may have been established by some authority or whatever. But this is Warshaw's team of folk who reviews what's going on in terms of policy development.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Very important for you to know and understand, as well as anyone else who's listening,
Right.
and anyone
for
else who is a
prosperity.
panelist. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Lieutenant Hubbard, you are resending the monitor all the information now, or how? Where is that?
I was wrestling with this today. I think it's best. Well, I'll maybe I should ask it this way. Is it best that the monitoring team weigh in with any edits they may have before it goes to the commission, full commission, for their final vote and review?
So the issue for me becomes that there's got to be a deadline, because we don't have a meeting September 12th. We do have a meeting, I guess it would be September 26th. And I want it scheduled to be reviewed, by the commission and approved by then. And some of my reasoning is a little selfish. I only have one more meeting after that, which is October 10th. And I want to make sure that this is finalized. I really do. It's not my work per se, but it is a reflection of the leadership that we have all demonstrated, and the hard work that we've all done. So I just want to make sure that it is final in all ways that it can be. So my gut is, Lieutenant Hubbard, that when you send him, and I don't think he needs the lesson plan or any of that, that's ours. But when you send him the policy, that you say, we need to have feedback, by the 12th or the 15th.
Yeah.
Something like that tells them, because I haven't had much engagement with him since I was the chair.
Yeah.
But I also need to ensure that we are very clear about our expectation.
Certainly. And they've been very good about having a quick turnaround. And on top of Chief Warshaw, he has a team that would help with this initiative. So, and if we give them a date, they're very good to meet that deadline.
Okay.
Okay, I want to go back to the top here. I will say that after the chief did review it over the weekend, he called me Saturday night, and I didn't have this in front of me, but he did change a couple things. So under the cultural accountability statement, we had it in there as just law enforcement tactics and strategies here, and then he added the word past law enforcement tactics and strategies.
Why?
He didn't really provide much context to this section. I think he wanted to make clear, and I think we said this near the end of our accountability statement, that while we have a lot of work to do, we certainly made a lot of great strides. So he didn't want to make it sound like we, the Oakland Police Department, are up to our same practices that we were pre or during the writers era, or, 40, 50 years ago.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and it may not be as bad as it was 40 or 50 years ago, but with the last couple of major scandals, it kind of sounds like it's the fruit from the same tree.
Yeah.
Did anybody disagree? Okay,
Yeah,
maybe
no,
I'm out here by myself.
No, I do
No,
not disagree
no,
with you with that
Okay.
statement at
I
all.
just, I just think enough said. I mean, you kind of,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah. So, I mean, we can say past. That's fine. It's, it doesn't look like there's a lot of work, that has been done there. I can live with that as long as you all can.
now
Go ahead, Deacon.
I'm uncomfortable with it too, because I haven't seen any departure from the culture that we are describing in the first few sentences. Racial profiling and laws threaten all people of color. That's true. They were initially designed to control African Americans and extended to other marginalized communities. That's true. Historical ties, profiling of slavery, codification into law reflects deep-seated biases and discriminatory practice that have been perpetuated through various eras in American history. What we are saying, or what I felt when I read that before pass was entered, is that we're still doing it. And I want it to be passed too. But we can't fix what we can't face. So I don't know if it's past tactics. I hear them talking, but I don't know if that's past tactics. Otherwise, how did we get all this evidence in this Writers Come Out at Night book and the Eberhardt study? All that's current stuff. So, either we're gonna tell the truth or we're not. So that's my feeling about it. I don't think it's in the past. I think it's current.
I think your point is well taken. Why don't we continue to review his comments? Because if this is the only real thing, then I don't know. I guess I could live with it. Or we could send it. Well, no, I guess we asked for his feedback. We
asked for his feedback, but I'm saddened for him. Okay, if he think it's in the past, that means we don't have the problem any longer. That's how I understand.
I hear it.
Communicated
I totally hear
here.
you. Yep.
And I think the reason why I'm here, or the reason why we have an ad hoc committee, and the reason why we're wrestling with, this negotiated settlement for 22 years is because it's not passed. So you can't come in and just say, oh, by fiat, that's in the past. No, sir.
Okay.
No, it's not in the past.
Correct. So let's do this. We see the highlight. Let's keep going.
Right.
And then by the time we get to the end of it, we can say, you know what? No, we don't want past. We want law enforcement tactics. And that's what we send to the monitor.
If it's in the past, we don't need no NSA. We don't need Warshaw.
Correct.
We don't need us here if it's in the past. So we just got to be honest about that. I'm here giving my time for free because it's not in the past.
That's correct. So am I.
Yeah.
And to Risa's comment, which is really on point, Deacon Lyle's point about can't fix what isn't faced is key. It's concerning that the chief thinks that it's in the past. So I think what we will likely do is go back after we've reviewed everything and decide what we will accept and what we won't.
Okay.
And then that's what we will forward to the monitor.
Good
Is
afternoon.
that
This
fair?
is Chair.
Go ahead, Marcia. Sorry.
No, I was just saying good afternoon. I just joined. the
Oh, okay.
meeting.
Thank
Sorry, I
you.
was
Thank you
late.
for being with us this evening. We are reviewing the police chief's comments on the racial profiling policy. And we just got stuck on his addition of past um, tactics. And we think that they're probably still current tactics based upon the couple of scandals that have recently come to light. So what we're going to do is review the rest of his comments and then decide which we will accept and which we will reject. And then we will determine that that information will then be sent to the monitor for their review. Normally, it happens the other way around and they provide feedback before it comes to us. But because this started at the commission level, it's kind of going slightly backwards. But I had explained to Lieutenant Hubbard that when we make this request for them to review it, because he wants it to be a request, that we give them a deadline. I really, since we don't have a September 12th meeting, I really want this to be on the commission's agenda for the 26th to approve. Marcia, you good?
No, that sounds good. No, that's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay, great. So Lieutenant Hubbard, please continue.
And the next change he made was this one. So he said, so we wrote, I'll highlight it so it's easier to see. To this end, we wrote each man and woman of the Oakland Police Department has made significant strides. And so this one, he did ask me over the phone. He said, or he asked, if I were to pick a random officer in the department, would they be able to attest to this? As in, that officer made significant strides towards rectifying the mistakes of the past. So he wanted to remove each man and woman and just change it to the Oakland Police Department as a whole.
I think that's reasonable. And I like the fact that he asked the question, because if you were to do that for individuals, some may not. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem, that's specific to gender. I think it's the Oakland Police Department problem. So I think his correction to say Oakland Police Department is probably better.
Yeah, I like it because it creates ownership for the entire department.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The rest of these, let's see. These are all just grammatical things that I fixed today. The one thing, so the next thing that he asked me about was, and his point was well taken. So sorry, I'm keep scrolling back here. All right. Our stop data and field-based reporting program dates back many years. We are starting an initiative to get a new field-based reporting program that is way more efficient than what we have now. And he asked me about antiquated policy that I did bring into this policy that may not fit into. So what my goal is to make this policy last for very many years, and I don't want to go back and have to fix things based on technology updates. So I want to create some things that are somewhat generalized, so we don't have to go on there and update it. And that's what I did here, where I took out. So as you see here, the stop data collection notice to appear things, including the RD number, which means a report number. Those things are all like technical stuff that I think we outgrew in our current database, but certainly will grow out of when we adopt a new one come next year. So to me, it didn't add any value to this policy. It just added confusion. So I just removed it altogether. And that was one of the questions he had for me, is like, do we still need this or do this? And I'm like, no, we really don't. So I took it out.
I think that's great. And that's very visionary on your part, because you're right. given the fact that these policies don't tend to be redone usually for between 15 and 20 years, we would like for ours to be that visionary that it can be in place for 20 years or more.
Thank you. And that's why I put in here the department's right here, the department's digital report writing platform. I kept it very general because I don't think we'll ever go back to the day where we're handwriting reports. I don't even know if I know how to do that anymore. And then the
Yeah,
last
I hope
is,
not.
I have to confirm this with my my team, but it says that hard copies of a field investigative report and stop data are need to be filled out if we have a technology failure. I have to make sure if we still have those forms, just in case that does happen. It hasn't happened in recent memory, but so that's just a note for myself that I added on here for today, and I'll get that confirmed by the end of the week.
What is FB?
Go ahead.
FBR stands for field-based reporting. Yeah.
That should probably be in
Lieutenant
place.
Hubbard, when the ransomware happened, you all had no access to anything, right?
We did not. So, but what we did was there were some handwritten reports for certain crimes, but a lot of it was just deferred until it was back online. And that somewhat was a motivating factor for us to go to a new system here pretty soon.
And how long did you wait until you went back online? How long was that?
I have to look at my notes, but I want to say it was a good week. Yeah, it was.
Is that all?
Well, it was back online, but we lost a lot of data. That was the biggest issue, is everything going before the breach. Yeah, it was bad.
So do you all have a backup plan if something like this were to happen again?
We're in a better state now because a lot of the problems were on the city server. So if we move things off to a different server, then we're in a better position. But if we come to a point where our system shut down like it did to where we can't write reports, we do have paper copies of certain reports. It was interesting because just even in the academy, we don't really teach handwriting reports anymore. So yeah, that was an interesting. We had to reintroduce that to people of what it's like to write things down as opposed to type.
Well, I wonder, it might be a nice thing to receive a standard operating procedure as it relates to technical challenges, so that we know that it's very clearly delineated what the steps are. Because I don't know, I'm not real comfortable we haven't had that happen in a long time.
Yeah,
Because a long time now is just like, what, 4 years?
right.
Yeah, so
Yeah, no, I
that's a
agree.
different request, but I
I like it.
okay, all right, thank you. All right, back to the review.
This was all just some cleanup here. Let's see. I don't think the chief. He just had this is his only comment regarding tactical operations support team. He didn't have any issues with that section. Oh, he did. And he's right. I had it in my example of racial profiling. I put Mercedes-Benz, so I gave them free advertisement. So he changed it to expensive vehicle here.
Okay,
That's I'm okay with that. I don't know if
yeah, that's fine.
okay. That's grammar. Yeah, this is all just cleanup I did. And I sent you a copy of this in case you want to know exactly what I changed, but there's a certain point where I have to stop looking at this because I will change something in perpetuity if I keep looking at this policy. Implicit bias, I just cleaned it up so it was a little bit more clear. I just didn't like my sentence structure and phrasing. Yeah, same thing for these definite. Yeah, so that was it for the chief. I thought he would have a lot more edits and comments, but I think that's a good sign because he is a critical reviewer of things. So He's marked up a lot of the things that I produced, and the fact that he didn't for this one just shows all the hard work you all did with this. So thank you. And
Thank you. That's what I'd like to go with too.
yeah, and
It was
I'm
very, very well done.
yeah, thank you. And I'm comfortable with even tonight just setting this to the monitoring team. I won't include the track changes. I'll clean it up and send it to them for their review at the deadline.
And you'll take past out.
Yeah, I think we all agree. Well,
Yeah.
Ricardo, Marcia, are you good with taking out the word past? The chief actually added it. And it was under the context of, we said law enforcement tactics and strategies. He was trying to say past as if those don't happen anymore.
Can you
And
hear
my
me?
comment, yes. Yes, we
Can you hear
can.
me?
Yes,
Okay, I know. Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, good. I know that there's I get the impression that the chief would like to see a lot of this spoken about in the past. But I think that anytime that we still experience the things that we continue to experience, uh, I think I think it's premature. So yes, take that out.
Okay, thank you. And Ricardo, are you good with taking that word out too? Okay, well, I'm seeing Lieutenant Hubbard change it,
Yes, I
so we're good.
everything's on
Oh,
this. And although
okay,
with
thank you.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so it sounds like we are finally at a final space. So Lieutenant Hubbard, excuse me, will the monitoring team receive this Thursday or Friday?
I'm going to send it to them tonight.
Okay, that's my guy.
They're East
All right.
Coast time, so they won't see it till tomorrow morning when they wake up, but they'll have it.
That's excellent. I appreciate that very much. So if it is everyone's will, we can call this done and transition to one, get a little summary overview of the discipline matrix. It's my understanding that it hasn't been reviewed or updated in 20 years as well. Lieutenant Hubbard, would you, for the public audience, share how the discipline matrix is used?
Certainly. Let me
Please.
just pull it up here for you. And let's see here. This ready. While I'm finding it, I can tell you all just the background to this. So you all remember probably Chief Went. I don't know how many chiefs ago that was, but it was pretty significant.
Wasn't that 2014? Chief
It
Wentz?
was about 2014. He was, well, we have to even go back further. So he was the captain of internal affairs when we put this together. So that's how long ago. So I want to say maybe it was Chief Batts who was the chief when, so we're probably going back even to 2009.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And sorry, as I'm pulling this up, I got to go on to here and just download it. But the way it worked was they first came up with a list of all the manual of rules violations that I know we looked at before. And there was a small group of people. I was brought in for a couple of the meetings, and I don't remember why I was brought in, but I was still an officer then. And it was really a debate over like, okay, you have this manual rules section. What would be the range, if you will, of discipline that is most appropriate based on what this is? So that's the genesis of this. I know the monitoring team at the time was involved in this, but again, we're talking about many years ago. So us looking at this is very relevant because we're talking about I mean, it's going to say 2014, but it even dated before that. So let me just pull this up. I'm sorry for the delay here. Okay. Everyone see this?
Yes. Woo, the font.
Yeah, let
But
me
yes.
fix that for you. Okay, and I'll go over this again. I mean, this is pretty long, but I'll give everyone just context of what they're looking at here. So in the left-hand side where it says MOR/class, that's the manual rules violation. So there is an accompanying policy or manual, if you will, that gives that section. So basically, if I were to look at 314.48, that's the section. And then when it says -1 or -2, that means it's either a class 1 violation or class 2. Class 1 is more serious than class 2. And there's nothing beyond that. It's just class 1 or class 2. So,
Lieutenant Hubbard, can you give
yeah.
an example of what is a class 1 versus what is a class 2 offense?
Sure. So, truthfulness is a class 1. That's severe. And then if I showed up late to work today and there was a complaint made against me, that would just be tardiness. That would be a class 2. Those are pretty two extreme examples, but you understand the.
Does everybody understand the distinction?
Yes.
And just for knowledge, CIPRA is required to investigate all class 1, but I don't think they're required to investigate class 2. Is that correct, Marcia?
Well, I think that's true because when Matt came on board, and even I think Zither was saying he was going to start taking in class 2 as well. But I don't think they ever did simply because they just don't have enough bandwidth.
Right, they're too far behind. So I would think that we should support him in ensuring that class 1 is prioritized, because if
Yes.
they're going after all these class 2s and then they don't have enough bandwidth to investigate a class 1, then that's a problem.
So the CPRA, I'll give you what they it's actually more restrictive than that, even though there's somewhat of a clause in it that they can investigate anything, right? But they actually, it's discrimination, it's use of force, it's I just looked this up. I went to their, and then I think it's whatever they choose to then investigate. So it's not always by default a class 1 violation.
Okay, I think it might make sense for us to ask him what his priority is around class 1, 2, 3, or 4, and where he will dedicate resources in the future. Just to determine, if we haven't asked him that question before, we probably need to get clarity.
Okay.
Are there any questions thus far?
No, I'm just in the house and I'm trying to get you guys on my computer. So give me a minute.
Okay,
I think
yeah, no problem.
it's probably goes without saying he has to give resources to class 1s because those could be criminal offenses.
Correct.
And their misconduct or violation of their rules and regulation that can end in death or injury or loss
Right.
of property and all of that. So he has to, yeah, he has to put.
I just want to be, no, to your point, I just want to be clear that if there are class 2 or 3 or cases that he wants to investigate, that we understand, this probably should be an SOP, that we understand the reason why, because, you know, when complaints come in and investigations need to be done, if you can't pivot toward the class 1, if you have been doing investigations on class 2, then that's a problem.
That's true. You know, we probably talk about this too much, but if it reaches the chiefs, if class 2 issues are reaching the chief's desk at his level, then his whole command staff has a problem. Sergeant, lieutenants, all of them.
Right.
I mean, they shouldn't even, you know, class 2 shouldn't even get there. They should be handled, you know, at the supervisory level, at the lieutenant's level, the captain's level. But a class 1 could be, you know, a rape charge, you know, fondling somebody, stealing somebody's property. I mean, all these things have happened in law enforcement. So I'm not saying anything that's out of untowards, but, you know, that Sonia Massey issue, that would be class 1. And so
Right.
they have the resources for those things.
No, you're absolutely correct. And like I said, I just don't want to make any assumptions with
Okay.
him. So I think it probably makes sense to have him clarify. That's all. So, Lieutenant Hubbard, is there some narrative around the discipline matrix, or is it just formulaic?
No, there is a narrative, and let me just pull that up. It's called the Manual of Roles, and I'll tell you how these two things sync up. Let's see if I could pull this up here. Can you all see that? It says Manual of Roles.
Just barely. Font is really, there we go.
Okay, as you see here, pretty long ago, 2010 with Chief Batts. Change the scrolling here, single page. So if you go, and I'll just skip ahead to something here. Let me look up 314. That's the most common one that we see. Okay, so if you look at, let's just say general conduct is 31403. So this would be the definition. So the matrix is, hey, this officer violated this, 31403. Okay, I want to know what that is. Then I look here, it says members and employees shall conduct themselves at all times in such a manner as to reflect favorably upon themselves, the city, the department, and the police service. Whether on or off duty, members and employees shall avoid any conduct that brings disrepute to the department or impairs its efficient and effective operation. So basically, we would be saying the officer in the course of the investigation was sustained for violating this section. Okay. And then what you do is you then go back to the matrix here and you would look up 314. I think it was. So right here, general conduct. Okay. And then you would ask yourself, okay, we know the definition. We have that. We know it's sustained. So then we're looking at whether it's the first offense, if you look in the right-hand column, second offense, or third offense. If it's the first offense, then the range for that would be counseling and training. That's what C means, all the way to suspension 3. So that's a 3-day suspension. If it's a second offense, then the range would be a written reprimand. That's WR, all the way to a suspension 5. So that's a 5-day suspension. If it's the third offense, then it would be a suspension 5 all the way to a suspension 30. And then what happens is you have the commander who says, okay, this is the range. And in the Wednesday discipline meetings that some of you may have attended in the past, they provide mitigating and aggravating factors. So for example, general conduct, if the officer was a field training officer and committed this offense, that would be an aggravating factor because they are in a position of leadership and mentorship. So that would aggravate up. However, if let's say the officer, they look at their performance evaluations received exceed expectations in the past, let's say 3 years, then that's a mitigating factor. So there's almost a point system that goes with it to determine, okay, if we're starting in the middle, let's just start with the first one here, counseling and training to suspension 3. Let's say the middle is suspension 1 day, then we mitigate and aggravate from that middle ground. That's how that works. And then the chief makes the final decision on that. Or if it's a CPRA concurrent case, then they also have a say in how much discipline.
Okay, and you mentioned that the general conduct is the most used MRI, or the most. Am I misremembering that, Lieutenant Hubbard?
It is
The most
me-
violated.
well, it's, let me see. I want to find, it's this one. I'm sorry. This is the most common one, performance of duty general. It's the most violated one. And the reason why you would find that as the most violated is because if it doesn't fit within anything else in this
Still subjective.
document, then it
Yeah.
falls under performance of duty general.
It's more of a catch-all.
Yeah.
Can you provide some examples?
Yeah, so on here we don't have, let's say, tactics. So let's just say, or I'll even use one that's relevant to the policy that we all wrote. Let's say that I continually failed to identify myself as a police officer when I make a car stop against someone for a traffic violation. Okay, we have it in policy that you can't do that, but there's nowhere in here that specifically says officer identification as a manual rules violation. So then the automatic de facto violation would be performance of duty general, and then this would be the range on this side.
I'm curious, is that something that a failure to identify yourself as a police officer, is that primarily with people who are 901 or undercover, or do officers do that? Or is
No,
this
yeah.
duty officers doing this? Because you're wearing a uniform, right? You got a badge on.
Yeah, no, you raise a good
Coming out
point.
of a police car.
Yeah, so the context of this conversation was centered around uses of force. And there's many different scenarios, but the two that commonly come up is one who's suffering from a mental crisis. They might not recognize you as a police officer just
Right.
because they hear a lot of noise, let's say, or whatever it may be. And so you saying, "Hey, I'm
Right.
police," but also, and this is coming from the
Like
monitoring.
not notice. You gotta.
Yeah.
Okay.
But and I always thought it would be like the subject of the force or the detention, but the monitoring group, Chief Kyler educated me, and I thought this was a good point, that it's also for the community. So let's say that you're, in the middle of the night, you're asleep and you hear a lot of commotion. It's nice to hear Oakland police coming out of someone's mouth.
Yeah.
So you know that it's the police. So it's a community initiative also.
Thank you very much. That helps.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a question. If you are confronted with conduct of a police officer that is considered serious, but clearly you can't list every single thing that is misconduct. Even if it's of a fairly serious nature and it brings a department under ill repute, does it back down to something as kind of innocuous? I for lack of a better word, general duty general.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There are so there are more severe sections within this. I mean, we talk about just general conduct, but if it was something serious, then it would fall probably more under this like conduct toward other harassment and discrimination. I mean, that's a class 1 violation. So again, what you would have to do is go back and read the definition to figure out which fits best. But bringing disrepute to the department, especially if it's criminal, that's a totally different section that we're talking about.
But even if it were not criminals, say for instance, you do have a policy about how to conduct yourself in certain situations with the public. But it says something pretty clear about that, but it doesn't say, however, within that, it doesn't mean that you can't do X, although X is something that is clearly inappropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to call out anything in particular, but we have something ongoing right now that struck me as peculiar insofar as an officer being cleared, because it doesn't say I can't do this on a Monday, and I did it on a Monday.
I can give you an example of something that happened a while back. It was published in the newspaper, so this is not violating any police officer Bill of Rights. But you had a couple of officers having a few drinks at a bar. They go around to another Alameda County employee's home, and the officer has an interest in this female, and I don't know if they had a relationship or not, but the two of them are standing out in front of her house screaming out her name, after midnight, telling her to come outside. Obviously they're intoxicated or what have you, and she did come out with her boyfriend, and there was a verbal confrontation. Okay, they're standing on public streets. They're exercising their free speech. They may be a little loud, but that's conduct unbecoming. Does anybody remember that case?
I do. Yes. I do remember.
Yeah. So that's the kind of maybe this guy did this only one time, and they never will do it again. So that would be conduct unbecoming. And as far as I'm concerned, they should, get, I don't know if they'd be terminated, but I definitely would want to see them to lose maybe a month salary, something severe.
Yeah. And thank you for that example. And Chair Peterson, I think this is why there's a range, because let's say, and I don't want to, I mean, under no circumstance should an officer swear at someone, but obviously there's different scales to that, where an officer saying a swear word in front of someone is a demeanor issue, but an officer going off on someone, swearing at them and calling them names also can fit within the context of demeanor, but one is definitely more severe than the other. And that's where you have aggravating factors, where it allows the chief not to look at those two things equally, but say, okay, this is a severe issue. I'm going to aggravate up to more discipline.
So this performance of duty general, what is this? CS2.
Yeah.
Counseling to suspension. And that's a suspension for 2 days?
Maximum.
Yes, ma'am.
First offense.
First offense. And second offense is
written
reprimand to a suspension of 5 days.
That's right.
What if, even if it's a first offense, whatever happened with the officer had a rippling effect? and an impact that was so great on citizens of Oakland, but yet there was no rule that specifically said you cannot do X. But again, it is something pretty serious and brings ill repute.
Right.
My
Yeah, no.
example.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the way that would work is that you would have this section, you would have performance of duty general because it
Yeah.
fits with that. But then you can also say for 314.03 up here, because it brought disrepute, which is in the definition of that, you can sustain that officer for that section. And then those two things are aggravating where you can aggravate up. That's how that works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In other words, you don't have to, based on the circumstances, stay within that first suggested disciplinary framework.
That's right.
Depend on the aggravating or attack
And the mitigating,
situation.
yeah.
Yeah, it can go up to 30 days.
Yes. And we've participated in that kind of back and forth when you look in the officer's file and see, oh, they've done this several times. They're
Yeah.
just not paying attention or disregarding or whatever. And that,
Right.
then you give them a more harsh consequence.
Right.
I think what I am particularly interested in is why almost everything seems to start with counseling and training. Because I'm not altogether certain when you do the counseling and training, is there a test at the end? Is there to ensure that they understood what they were counseled and trained on, or what?
And may I just add to your great question?
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Lieutenant. I don't know that counseling is disciplinary.
I never thought it was.
No, I don't
I think it starts with a written reprimand,
written. Yeah,
letter of reprimand in the file.
right. So if
Lieutenant, is that because if we're having a problem with the very definition of this matrix, we need to correct it.
Yeah, I'll answer your question first, Commissioner. This very issue came up last week because we gave an officer counseling and training, and sometimes that could be a sergeant saying, "Don't do that again," and like that's not really counseling nor training, and no lessons are really learned there, and there's really no measure of effectiveness. So I like to standardize that format to where if you are going to put training in that definition, then it needs to be real training that's documented with some type of learning outcome to go with it.
yeah,
And
like a performance improvement plan, it's got to
that's
be
right.
okay.
That's right. And that does not, I shouldn't say it doesn't exist, but it depends on who's giving the discipline.
Right.
Yeah. Part two, the question was, is counseling and training. So counseling and training is in the discipline matrix. So it's on one's file. So if Brian Hubbard shows up tardy today, I would get counseling and training, for example. And then I'm tardy again the next few weeks. You will see it on my file as counseling and training. So you can aggravate up using this matrix from there. But the argument of whether it's actually discipline, legally, exact. Thank you for that.
It's not discipline legally.
That's right. And nor is there so there's no Skelly process. I know we talk a lot about Skelly. There's no Skelly process for counseling or training. It'd have to be a minimum of 1 day suspension. So then it's like, well, if you're giving me this discipline, do I even have appeals right? No. So it's really just training. Let's just call it what it is. It's try to do better next time, and here's some training to go with it.
Okay, so given the fact that there is no definitive proof that training or counseling changes anything, that they actually understand that they were listening, all of that, should we then be removing counseling and training from the discipline matrix and identifying, let's say in the narrative, that because it is not considered discipline, it is not listed? Or is that a problem?
I
Well-
don't know. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I don't, and I probably should talk less, but I
Never.
don't want us to think.
No,
that
talk
counseling-
more, please.
I don't think that counseling, doesn't do its job. It does its job way more than it doesn't.
Yeah.
85% of the folks who do something one time or a second time, but didn't know that people are watching them and don't like them doing this or whatever, change upon just a sergeant saying, look, you got to be here on time. Not just on time for a month, but on time every day you come to work. That's counseling. And often the vast majority of people who hear that adjust their behavior. And
Yeah.
so counseling that is not disciplinary has a place in law enforcement because the vast majority of people respond to it. What we have to drill down, not get caught in the weeds about that, but how do we deal with the person who's not going to do what you tell them or advise them to do?
Yeah.
And are stiff-necked and maybe have some ego issues or some kind of mania issues that they're just not going to respond to this sergeant because I don't like this sergeant. He doesn't like me or she doesn't like me. So I'm going to do it again and I'm going to do it again. That's the person that ends up being a danger to the public. And we have to, that's the behavior that we want to recognize early on, and then say, well, we're gonna have I use the phrase performance improvement plan, but some kind of monitoring them and then come to a conclusion, this individual is not good in law enforcement. So we need to find this out before they're off probation.
Isn't it true, though, that counseling is the floor
Yes.
of progressive discipline?
Yes.
So that if an officer should engage in similar misconduct or not, it could be utilized as that. When you say aggravating, it could bump up something if necessary. So it is part of the progressive discipline.
Yeah, you've been counseled on this 3 times.
Yeah.
In 18 months. Yeah. And it's not a big deal. You're coming to work late. You come to work 12 months out of the year, and in 18 months you've been late 4 times. That's not a big deal to some people. But if for law enforcement, you got to be on duty out there at, you're late, man. We need you. Everybody out there needs you. So we got to do something about this. Otherwise, you can't be here. Folks change their behavior with that. So it is progressive disciplinary action. And I want to say that the vast majority of people respond to that. What we need to say is how do we and what do we say to the person who is defiant? That's the person that ends up in front of you and Regina and Ricardo. That's the individual who does something that hurts the citizenry. And if the police department, if the sergeants were more cognizant and wary about that and have enough backbone to say, look, I'm not having this out of you any longer. If they were more confrontational, I think people will adjust or leave or come to the realization, this is not what I want to do.
But what is the utility of counseling someone over and over again about something.
That's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, lighting a match. May have a long fuse, but at the end of that fuse is a stick of dynamite.
Yes, and the challenge for me, and that's why I like the aggravating circumstances, because their own personnel record tells on them. And then you can go that much higher with
Or-
the number of days or what have you.
Or their arrest behavior. Let's say you got a person that's always arresting people for 415F. I mean, it's always, 148. It's always.
Okay, 148, please, Deacon Lyles, would you
I'm-
help
I'm-
us understand what that is?
you're not doing what the officer asks you to do when the officer has every right to ask you to do. You're out of line. You are probably breaking the law, and the
Okay.
officer is trying to engage with you, and you're resisting. And it's not just verbal resisting. It's verbal. It's walking away. It's pushing, and it's all of that. Now, if you're going to patrol a community like Oakland, you're going to have some of those, but you shouldn't have 40 of them in a month. Something's not right here. You having too many. What's going on with you? Why are you always engaging in someone that is always fighting you? It could be your problem. Why are you always arresting women for 148? I've had that experience. Something is not right maybe with you, but you don't see it until you look at all of the arrests they have, and it's always 148 women. So this guy got through the psychological and the background and all that, but this guy has a hatred for women, and it's coming out. So fortunately, I'm sorry for saying unfortunately. Fortunately, that's what sergeants supposed to do. They're supposed to be cognizant of that, to see pattern and practices in personalities and say, hey, this is out of line.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this, Reg.
Okay.
Pattern and practice. I remember attending my first discipline meeting, not knowing I wasn't supposed to speak. And the officer had engaged in something repetitively. And I asked the question, well, when is it a pattern and practice that you take note of? And I was told, we know it when we see it.
Okay, that's culture talking. And that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to get away from.
Right.
We all
Yes.
here need to understand. That's why we can't say past in the blasting.
That's correct. That's right.
That's culture talking. Every officer doesn't do that, but you do have some that do. And that's the purpose of supervision, to recognize it, correct it, or try to correct it, counsel it away. And then if not, make the tough decision and say, there's something else you need to do for a living.
Now that makes very, very good sense. Lieutenant Hubbard, is there space within the narrative for us to identify the dangers of pattern and practice as of aggravating metric, or does it not belong?
There is. It's policy M as in Mary 3. It's our internal affairs disciplinary policy. It's not necessarily open right now for edits, but I can write that. I will say that I am, as you know, working on the pattern policy, but also just a general supervisory note file policy where it would help push things more to internal affairs investigations based on that policy. So if there's room for correction and training, do it here. And here's how to do it. I'm going to be very clear in the policy on how to do that. But if you notice a pattern, which right now I recognize 3 or multiple within a 3-year period, then it becomes an internal affairs case where then one of these would then apply. So it's a little bit more, you won't get the we'll know it when we see it comments. It will be clearly defined in policy.
I'm
they,
glad to hear it.
do they have, there was still, do they have a 148 board?
We don't have a 148 board. We do have a policy that says if an officer does have a 148 arrest or PC 69, then the supervisor has to audit that arrest. They have to review the body worn camera and review it.
Wow.
Lieutenant Hubbard, the PC 69 for all our listening public. Can you
Sure.
explain that?
It's similar to what Deacon Lyle says. It's 148, but in a felony version of that. So if there's obstruction of it against an officer, if it's a simple misdemeanor, it's a PC 148. But if it's a felony, let's say the person assaulted an officer, then it would be PC 69.
Thank you very much. I've
It
always
seems-
been interested when people call the numbers over the, over the intercom or the radio or what have you. And I'm like, how many numbers are there?
Yeah.
And I know that they've got to distinguish between how many numbers are there in terms of the call numbers?
It's a lot. Yeah. Because
I mean, does it go past 500 or what?
well, it's hard because we have our 9 code that we will just to communicate with each other, but then you have the dispatchers who can throw out just, any crime and vehicle code violation and health and safety and family code and evidence code. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't one of the elements of the NSA agreement the monitoring 148 type arrests? Or it seems like I remember distinctively reading those, and that OPD has done a great job at that. They had, the captains, I think a captain had to sit on it, and then the officer was brought in front of the captain, but for those kind of charges. Am I incorrect in that?
That is correct.
So that, does that still exist now? It doesn't any longer.
We never had a formal board or anything, but it is audited, if you will. We do in our risk management meetings analyze all 148 PC 69 arrests and the underlying factor behind those.
See, I submit to us that that's how we get to these. We can do less counseling and use that kind of apparatus more. And I don't think I'm writing down, I'm counseling Officer Smith if I tell him, look, when you driving through the parking lot, slow down. That's counseling. I'm not writing that down.
Correct.
Why is it when you get off work, you flying in and out of this parking lot? I don't want to see that any longer. I'm not writing that down, but that is counseling.
Yeah.
I would say counseling for something that is, just bordering on egregious, but not, but
At the doorstep and not following, not walking through.
Yeah. Some things, something that can be explained away. There's no, why did you throw so-and-so's paperwork in the garbage can? I thought it was garbage. See, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real problem, but I wouldn't have, as a sergeant, I wouldn't have enough evidence to move beyond the fact that maybe you just made a mistake. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
it's it
So,
needs.
I wonder, Lieutenant Hubbard, I know we put you on the spot a lot, but obviously you're the active,
What else we got?
police lieutenant. How, in general, how often are people not responsive to counseling? And I think I heard Deacon say that more people respond than don't.
Wait a
But
minute.
I'm wondering, go ahead, but is it still of value? I mean, it's obviously delivered by different people. It may come off different ways.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'll try to answer it as best as I can. We all have, friends and family members that just don't respond to criticism well, and that's sometimes how counseling and training goes, where you can just tell, like it's just not sinking in, or they just it's very binary, where it's like, oh, you're just doing this because you have to as a commander or supervisor. But then you get those who you supervise and counsel and train that are almost in tears because they're so sorrowful for what they did, and that it's like, it sunk in, like that it will never happen again with them. And so you get, I would say, the latter of what I describe is probably the majority of what we deal with. Rarely do I see someone making the same mistake over and over again knowingly, to where it then becomes a significant issue. um but I not going to deny the fact that we do have those that are defiant, who just like, yeah, well, I'm probably going to do it again, and we have to take it up a notch.
Or two, or
Yeah.
three.
Yeah.
Right. And the sooner the better.
Yep.
You know, and of course they have, they got Police Officers Bill of Rights on their side. They got the association and all of that. So none of this is easy work. It's probably more work for the sergeant, but the work should be done even if the sergeant loses the case. It's established. We got a problem individual here, and they need to understand that we undersee them as such, and that's that.
So given this rich conversation, Lieutenant Hubbard, what is your recommendation for how we start chopping away at this? I think that, we only have 15 minutes, so obviously I'm gonna want to encourage people to submit your recommended changes, updates, and then perhaps based upon what Lieutenant Hubbard collects, then we can review in that way. Or I'm happy to take any recommendations for how we move forward.
I would like us to deal with the hard ones first. The real difficult ones that are not, because it's going to take some time, some thinking, and some understanding of how OPD's culture is functioning now. For example, I just saw something that said counseling to interfering with obstructing the internal affairs process. Now, why would somebody get a second shot at that? And why would they ever need to be counseled? If you're interfering, obstructing the internal affairs process, I would want to know what that is. Calling people up saying, tell them I said so-and-so. I know I didn't say it, but you're my witness. You're my buddy, blah, 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 blah. We fished together, blah, blah. Okay, that's over the line. I don't know why you give somebody a second bite at that apple. If you're obstructing internal affairs investigation, That's the backbone of the ethics and the morality of the department. If you're obstructing that, then you shouldn't be at the department. We find you have violated that, we're going to try to terminate you.
So Deacon, I like your suggestion. I wonder, Lieutenant Hubbard, between now and our next meeting, or hopefully within the next week or so, can you identify the most challenging, most difficult ones that we want to take a look at first? Obviously, we want to take a look at the narrative, but in terms of indicating those codes that are most problematic, do you think you have the wherewithal, the knowledge to be able to do that?
I believe I do. I need to consult probably with our internal affairs division just to see what they can tell me from their weekly meetings that they have.
Okay.
I can do it anecdotally just for my involvement, but I can get it started. Yeah. I can tell you that if we're looking at revamping the entire matrix, which maybe it probably would require its own ad hoc, and it's going to be a big project. And
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, what we
so
determined, Lieutenant Hubbard, when we started the racial profiling was that we wanted to stay together and do the discipline matrix as an ad hoc. We could call it something different, or we could call it racial profiling and discipline matrix. I don't have a preference one way or the other, but I know this body said that they wanted to stay to do the secondary, well, maybe not secondary, but this second assignment, if
Yeah.
you will.
Tell you, this is going to require meet and confer with the union too.
Oh yeah, of course.
Big
But
process.
if we can get it started, again, I'm not trying to push a timeline that just serves me, but I recognize that there's going to be some major transitions at the end of October. And I was hoping if we can't get it finished, at least we could get way down the road,
Yep.
Okay. So with that, unless there are any other questions, I think you're confirmed at the fact that Lieutenant Hubbard is going to send the racial profiling updates to the monitors team tonight. And that hopefully within the next week, given the fact that we only meet every other week, that Lieutenant Hubbard could zero in on the most challenging discipline codes so that we can, to Deacon Lyle's recommendation, handle the most challenging ones. Do I have that? I see heads nodding.
Yeah,
And there are no,
understanding. Yes.
okay, great. And there are no comments in the chat. So with that, I'm going to give you all back 10 whole minutes.
Well, first, before we do that,
Uh-oh, or not.
are we considering ourselves finished with the racial profiling, or could it come back to us? One, because to create another ad hoc with another, it should have a different name. It shouldn't be racial profiling. It should be.
So that's fine. And I think we are sending our draft final to the monitoring team. If they have some, small edits like the chief had, fine. If they're trying to do something more substantial, then, the 2-week pause on the racial profiling ad hoc, then kicks back into place. But I think that for now, we can consider the discipline matrix ad hoc as a starting point at our next meeting.
And is it the will of this group, though, that we rename this ad hoc? I guess that's the thing, because there might be
I think it's fine.
New people who want to come on because it's now about the discipline matrix, and I can imagine a couple of people who would.
Well, that's fine. I know that this primary group had said that they wanted to tackle discipline matrix, and so if the name of the ad hoc changes and other people join us, that's fine. I just wanted to ensure that the hard work that these folks on the racial profiling ad hoc had done would bring as well to the discipline matrix ad hoc.
Of
So
course.
I think it's fine unless I'm hearing some challenges that we are going to put a pause on the racial profiling proposal while it's being reviewed. And then whatever we come back with, if it's not a lot, then we'll just make the adjustments and go straight to the commission for approval. If it is a lot, then we will call another meeting to review. And once again, the recommendations, in my humble opinion, are helpful additions and edits, but they are not necessarily mandatory ones.
And we got to thank Lieutenant Hubbard for
Without
phenomenal
question.
job.
No, phenomenal. You continue to keep the bar high, your
Yeah.
thoroughness, your flexibility, and your knowledge,
Thank you.
as well as your progressive approaches or your agreement with progressive approaches. We certainly appreciate all of it.
Very,
Thank you
very
very
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so thank you to everyone. We're going to give you back 7 minutes and look forward to several emails that we should receive prior to the next at discipline matrix ad hoc meeting, which will again be every other Wednesday, 6 to 7:30, same bat channel, so to speak.
Okay.
I'm on my way to
Thank you.
Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to turn on the DNC right now.
Yeah.
Okay. See you
Okay.
guys. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Right. Take care.